Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. Today we're going to go over the application process for Montana, for deer and elk specifically. The application period is open now, open March 1st and it ends April 1st. So now is your chance to ask questions that you might have. I've been living in Montana for 5 years, so I've got to know the process pretty well. Helped a bunch of friends that are non-residents and navigate it as well, and learned a lot of lessons over the time, answered a lot of questions. So figured this is something that comes up every year. As a person who's hunted many states as a non-resident, I think Montana is definitely one of the more confusing ones. A lot of states are easier to navigate. Montana, for whatever reason, their website's not the greatest and it's just more difficult. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll answer all the questions I can here. And in the meantime, I'm going to go through some of the basics. So let's start out with a screen share here of some of the basics you're going to need to know while you're going to hunt in Montana. Okay, so one of the big ones is if you were born if you were born after January 1st, 1985, and you plan to bow hunt, you're going to need a bow hunter's education course. That doesn't have to be Montana specific, but you're going to have one in your home state. And I believe if you're born before 1985, like I was, then if you had a bow hunting license from a previous state, I think you can just sign an attestation saying that you've had bow hunter's education in the past, like a waiver, and they'll just accept that. And or I think you can input your hunter safety certificate number from whatever state issued it, and that will work as well. What species do you want to hunt? We're talking about deer and elk today, so keep the questions specific to that. Where you want to hunt, we can look at some maps later, but you can find a hunting district. Montana is obviously a very large state. It's divided up into 7 regions, and each hunting district is labeled. The first number in each district is which region it's located in. So, for example, I live just outside of Billings, and most of my area is Region 5. So all my hunting districts are 5XX, 510, 502, 530, etc. You have to decide if you want to hunt archery or general. For right now, one of the cool things about Montana is if you get a deer elk license, unlike a lot of states, it's not valid just for one weapon season or the other. So if you get a elk or deer license, you're able to hunt the entire archery and rifle season if you could accommodate that, or you could have an archery hunt early, rifle hunt later. So it's kind of nice. You get the full season. Montana's got a 6-week archery season and a 5-week rifle season. And just recently, I think they instituted like a 10-day, maybe it's 11-day traditional muzzleloader season, which means flintlocks, matchlocks, no scopes, things like that. So traditional muzzleloaders. So that's cool. So Steve Huffman. Hey, Steve, how you doing? He says at 58, I'll probably never venture away from West Virginia, but here to support your channel. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you. Required licenses, permits, and deadlines. So, as I mentioned, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. Deadlines coming up. April 1st, 11:45 Mountain Time is your deadline to get your deer or elk application in. And let's look at the deadline and drawing dates. Again, deer and elk, April 1st. If you're interested in any of the other applications, you can get a moose, bison, sheep, or goat application. Those are due May 1st. And then antelope, elk B, which we're going to talk about B tags. B is anything female. So that's an elk cow tag, or deer B, which would be a doe tag. Those are due June 1st. Okay, let's see what else we got on the agenda here. Let's talk about the stats. So, if you're interested in applying, one of the weird things about Montana is a lot of times you actually have better odds with 0 preference points than you do with 1 preference point, and that seems backwards to how preference point system works. But for whatever reason, the Montana legislature passed a law where every year 25% of the non-resident tag quota goes to 0 preference point applicants. So a lot of years you have better odds drawing with 0 than you do with one. And I'll show you an example of that here. Okay, so here are some of the stats from the last couple of years, 2021. So if you had 0 points in 2021 for the big game elk combo drawing, you actually had a 71% chance. And if you had 1 point, you had a 31% chance. And the reason that is, again, is 25% of the total number of tags available went to 0 point applicants. So something that you may want to consider if you're going to apply, you might want to buy a preference point in the summer. So right now, if you apply, you're able to buy a preference point at the time of application, and that will count towards your application. So if you've never applied to Montana and you applied right now and bought a preference point, you would have 1 point going into the drawing. But you're also allowed to buy, if you don't apply this year, you're allowed to buy preference points during July 1st to September 30th period. And what you would do is, let's say you wanted to hunt next year, 2025, you would buy 1 point in the July to September period, and then you'd buy a point next year. And then you'd have 2 points going into the drawing. So if you look at this, anybody over 1.2 was 100% draw in 2021. And then 2 points in 2022 is a 97.5%. So you're basically guaranteed. So what I recommend to a lot of people is to do that, to buy one preference point in the summer prior to the year you plan on going, and then the following year apply during the application period, which for right now has always been March 1st to April 1st. And then you're going to be 100% or near 100% chance to draw. So let's look at if you've never applied now. So if you've never applied before, one of the first things you're going to need to do is to get an what's called an ALS. And ALS stands for Automated Licensing System. So you're going to need to get an ALS number. Think of that as your social security number for your Montana hunting. So let's look at that real quick. Okay, so I'll put these links in afterwards with a little description of what they are. But we're at OLS, which is Online Licensing System, FWP, that's Montana's Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So we're at the website there. And what you would do if you're a non resident trying to establish your automated licensing number, you're going to want to go to this website. You want to scroll down to click I am a non resident. And then it's going to ask you for your information. And over here, it's say, I can't remember my ALS, or I do not have an ALS. You're going to want to go here to I do not have an ALS. It's going to ask you a bunch of information. You're going to fill that all out and follow the prompts. And then it'll give you an ALS number. And what your ALS number is, it always follows the format that it's going to be your month, day, and year of your birthday dash, usually a 2 or 3 digit number. So, let's say your birthday was January 1st, 1980, it would be 1 1 1980 52 or 143, whatever arbitrary number. And whatever your number is, that's how many people before you have that birthday with that ALS number. Let's look at the chat real quick. Got a couple more questions coming in here. George Hamrick, how's it going? We got a couple of West Virginia folks on from Nicholas County. So anyways, once you get in establish your ALS number, you're going to be able to apply then. So to do that, let's look at another website. Before we do that, one of the things that I felt was very confusing when I first started looking into this was talking about bonus points and preference points. And as I kind of went over, a preference point helps you draw your tag. Think of that as getting your kill tag. And if you've got 3 preference points, you're always going to draw before someone with 2. And if you have 2, you'll always draw before someone who has 1. But with the caveat, if you have 1, you may not have as good of odds as someone with 0 because of that rule where the Montana allocates 25% of the tags available in the quota to 0 point applicants. So that's the only thing that's kind of weird about Montana. And then a bonus point, what a bonus point is think of a bonus point as a lottery ticket in a raffle. So what Montana does is you're allowed to buy one bonus point per year, and every year you do not draw your first choice area. So these are for draw areas, then you earn another bonus point. So for example, let's say I've not drawn for 3 years. What Montana does is they take your bonus points, three, and then they square them. So that would be nine, and then add one. Or for example, if you had five, five squared would be 25 plus one would be 26. And essentially you have that many raffle tickets into drawing a special draw area. So someone with 1 point may still draw, but someone with 10, for example, they'd have 10 squared, which would be 100 plus one. So they'd have 101 tickets in the raffle. So they're much more likely to draw, but you can still draw with one. So it's kind of a unique system there, and it gives you a chance if you don't have any points at all, unlike some states where Colorado, where they're strictly preference point, and you might have a lot of people sitting on 15, 18, 20 points, and unless you've built up that many points, you're not drawn to certain areas. So there's that. Let's look at the preference points, or sorry, the bonus points real quick. Okay, as we talked about, just a little refresher here, and again, I'll put these links in the description, but 75% of non-resident combination licenses are awarded to applicants in the order of which applicants have purchased the greatest number of preference points. Basically, in layman's terms, that means, like I said before, 3 points will get a tag before 2 points, 2 points before one. However, if you have 0 points, you might draw before one because of that weird rule. The other 25% are awarded to applicants who have not purchased any preference points. So again, if there's a 10,000 elk tags, 2,500 of those are going to go to 0 point applicants. So you do have a chance to draw every year, even if you have 0 points. And something that's very, very important, if you've never applied to Montana, this is a new change as of 2 years ago. They didn't advertise this well, and it made a lot of people mad. Basically, any accumulated preference points are lost if the applicant does not apply for a non-resident combination license in consecutive years, or if you are successful at obtaining a combination license. What that means is, let's say you buy a preference point this summer because you want to come and try to get a tag in the fall 2025. So you buy a point in July of 2024. You're going to apply in the March 1st to April 1st period of 2025. If for some reason you're unable to apply, you're going to lose that preference point. So you spent $100 on the preference point in 2024. If you don't apply in consecutive years, meaning the following year, every year until you draw, any points that you accumulate are forfeited. And they switched this, I think it was in 21 or maybe 22. Maybe it was 22. But there was people that had like 4, 5, 6 points that didn't know this change was coming, and they lost all their points at what the time was $50 a crack. So if you had 5 points at $50, you lost $250, and the state said, too bad. The only positive side of that, in my opinion, is it does keep the preference point pool lower. So there's a lot less point creep in Montana now. And I actually think it says in the regulations, the max number of points you can have is 3. So compared to states like Iowa now, if you want some of the premium zones in Iowa, you're looking at 5, 6 points. In Montana now, if you do it intelligently, like I said, if you buy a preference point the year prior to applying and then one at the point of application, you can basically hunt Montana for deer or elk, or deer and elk, every other year. So it's a pretty good system there. But if you're not aware of that, you can't just build points endlessly in Montana, preference points, or you're going to lose them. So apply every year or lose your points. Let's see. We got a comment from George, I believe. George, do you have a dream tag out there? Are you just hunting as many general tags as you can? My dream tag in Montana would probably be either a moose or a sheep. I've got 5 points for each of those because I've applied every year since I've lived here. Have not drawn. Both of those are super rare tags to get, like 1%, 2% odds in most units. So I would like to get one of those. The reality is I probably never will. I actually have a neighbor that lives around the corner from me. The guy's 52. He drew his sheep tag last year or the year before, and he had been applying every year since he was 12. So it took him 40 years to get a sheep tag. At that rate, I'll probably I'll probably be in a wheelchair before I'll go on a sheep or moose hunt. But because it is a lottery and I have points, I have a chance every year. So I keep applying, hoping that I'm one of those lucky people that draws before they have maximum points. Steve, could they not just sell a certain amount of tags to residents and a certain amount to non-residents, or would they lose money? So I think the way the quotas are set up, Steve, is those are set up based on biologist input. So the residents for elk and deer, residents can buy a general tag every year, and I just don't think there's enough elk to support an unlimited number of non-resident tags. And then even for residents, large parts of the state are drawing. So you have to put in for an elk permit, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Those are special draw areas, and most of the special draw areas are where there's just not big enough elk herds to support, you know, as many people that would like to hunt there. So they limit them through a drawing. And George says, "Good luck drawing those. Can't draw if you're not in it." That's correct. I cannot. So keep applying and keep building up points. It's just every year you open the drawing and you kind of laugh because you know you're not going to draw, but there is a slim chance. So gotta apply. And one of the last things I wanted to cover here, because this is kind of unique too. Um, if you apply for a combination license and an elk permit, you'll have the opportunity to select an 80% refund option if you select that option and are unsuccessful, or sorry, and are successful in the combination license drawing, but unsuccessful in the elk permit drawing, you will receive an 80% refund of your license fee. Okay, let me explain this in layman's term. Again, this is confusing. So basically, what this is saying is if you apply for a combination license, think of the combination license as your elk or deer general permit, meaning you can hunt areas that are general and not drawing areas. And an elk permit. An elk permit means you wanted an elk tag that you could use in any general area. And an elk permit means you applied for a specific zone, which is a draw zone. If you do not draw your elk permit, so if you're unsuccessful in getting the special draw area, let's say you wanted to hunt the Missouri breaks and you applied for a Missouri breaks tag, but you didn't get it, but you got your regular general elk tag. You can do one of two things. You can keep the general elk tag and go hunt in the general zones, or you can get an 80% refund on your general tag, keep your bonus point, and try to apply for the breaks again the following year. And then I guess I lied. Last thing on this page, you can apply as a party. So if you and a friend want to come, this is pretty common in most states. You can have up to 5 applicants on a party. Basically, the first person that opens the application will say yes to is this a party? You'll put the other party members' names, up to 4 other people in there. And then when they apply, they'll reference your party number. And then either all of you guys will draw or none of you guys will draw. So that's something to look at also. And now I want to look at kind of an overview of the regulations because, again, when I started hunting in Montana, I thought these were kind of confusing. So let's take a peek at the regulations real quick. I think I have those open. Okay, so these are the 2024 deer and elk regulations. As you can see, 146 pages, so not exactly light reading. We'll look at an example here of a specific unit. I don't know where they start, so I usually just scroll. You got maps, you got all the rules. There's a bunch of legal descriptions. They got last year's drawing statistics, which I'm going to show you guys a place where you can get the draw stats online too. Again, I'll put a link in the description when this is over. You can check it out. But for example, if you wanted a deer permit last year, and let's say you wanted to go to 10150, unit 10150, which would be in the northwest part of the state, you only had a 5% chance. If you wanted to go to 10350, you had a 2% chance. So the last year's stats are in there. Those are helpful. And you can download these regulations or you can request a paper booklet copy, and FWP will mail you one. Being this late in the drawing, I would highly recommend downloading them if you're looking at them. They tell you what's a grizzly bear and what's a black bear. That's a good point. We should talk about grizzly bears for a second. So, for people that don't know, Montana is grizzly bear country. I think most people know that are hunting. The Northwest and the Southwest part of the state have the most bears, but bears are pretty much into the entire western half of the state and even a little beyond the center north south line. So, if you're coming to Montana to hunt, be bear aware, bear spray, gun, or both. Okay, so here's an example of what the regulations look like. So let's say you wanted to hunt a specific unit. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit and make this a little bigger. Yeah, there we go. And let's say you had a general deer tag and you wanted to hunt region 100. You would look and say, okay, I have a general deer license. It'll tell you antlered buck mule deer. What am I good for here? Archery season dates. Yep. General season, that's rifle. Yep. And the heritage muzzleloader season. Either sex whitetail deer, both, but you can't hunt those. You can't hunt those during the heritage season. Antlered buck, whitetail only. So if you're just hunting bucks, you can hunt them here, here, and we'll look at some regions that I'm more familiar with, which would be like region. Let me scroll down here. Region 5, where I live. Okay, here's HD 535. So Southern Snowy Mountains. If you had a general deer license, you can hunt either sex white-tailed deer. Now, anytime you see a permit, and that's part of the reason I picked this one, deer permit, you cannot shoot a mule deer in this area unless you apply for a permit. So that means you need to have your general deer license, and you also need to apply at the time of application. You'd have to select that you wanted a 535-50 deer permit. And if you draw, and only if you draw, then you could shoot a antlered buck mule deer. And B licenses. So we talked about B licenses a little bit. Anytime you see B, that means antlerless deer, or sorry, female, because it could be B elk tag, which would be a cow elk. So you would also have to put in for a permit 535,000, sorry, 2 zeros, to shoot an antlerless mule deer there. Or if you wanted to shoot an antlerless whitetail deer, you'd apply for the 00500. It'll tell you what the quota is, what the quota range is, when your application date deadline is, where it's not valid. So it's not valid on national forest lands in this. So the regulations are super important because you need to look at what your general deer license will do for you there, and whether that's whitetail buck, either sex whitetail, either sex mule deer, just antlered mule deer. You have to read these and you have to kind of understand how it is, or else you can get yourself in trouble pretty quick. And in the same unit, let's look at elk. So if you had just a general elk license, let's say you put in for a permit area and you didn't draw and you wanted to go hunt this area for elk. What can you do on a general elk license? You could shoot a spike bull or a cow elk. And these are the dates. So antlerless elk, some areas, if you see this August 15th to September 6th, this is an early hunt for cows only a lot of times. Some of the hunt districts that are overpopulated have these. So you could potentially have an early cow hunt if that was something you'd be interested in on a general tag. So that's pretty cool. Notice these are only valid on private land. So you got to read the notes too. So if you knew someone or you were going to outfit with someone that had private land and you had a general tag that you just wanted to shoot a cow on, that's one avenue to do it. And also, a lot of times there's late seasons, what they call in Montana shoulder season. So after the regular hunting ends for bulls, you can look at this shoulder season. This is not valid on national forest lands or Montana WMAs. Again, private lands or like Bureau of Land Management lands, stuff that's not national forest. You can still hunt a lot of that stuff on a shoulder tag. So interesting stuff to note there. Now, if you wanted, notice this is spike bull or antlerless elk. If you were hunting in 535 and you wanted to shoot what's called a brow tine bull, something that's got brow tines, that's not a spike. So generally it's a 2-year-old or older bull. You need a permit. So you cannot go into 535 and shoot the monster bull of your dreams without a permit. So at the time of application, you would apply for your general elk tag, and then you would also select permit area 535 and 41120. If you notice the quote is a lot lower, dash 20 usually means that's a rifle hunt, and then 595 dash 21, that is an archery tag. So one of the other ways that you can tell if it's just an archery tag, if you look at the season dates over here, this is only the archery season. Under the general season dates, there's nothing. So this tag, if you draw it, there's a lot higher quota, so you got better odds to draw it, but it's only valid for the archery season only. If you had a general tag and this permit, you can hunt archery bulls in this area. And then once the archery season is over, you could go back and you could still hunt this area, but then you'd only be hunting spike bulls or antlerless elk with your rifle. So that's kind of how to read the regulations. I think got another question here. Have you had any run-ins with grizzlies there? I've hunted elk, but never been in grizzly country. So I don't hunt the areas typically that are very grizzly dense. One, the northwest part of the state, that's just a long drive for me. There's better areas to hunt closer to home, so I typically don't venture there. Southwest Montana, I've done a fair amount of hiking there and some hunting. I've seen two grizzlies, never any close calls. So I would say it's rare, but every year there are certain areas that people get attacked, mauled, or have close encounters. So if you do some research on that, those areas are generally on the western side of the state. In certain ranges, one that comes to mind, and I think it's decent elk hunting. I've never hunted there, but you hear about people getting mauled or attacked there fairly often, is the Gravelly range. So but there's still plenty of guys that hunt it every year and have no issues. Just have to be more aware, I think. So, and a lot of times it's like the thick areas, when you're hunting, you're being quiet, and it's just a surprise encounter where you don't see the bear and the bear doesn't see you until you're all close, and that's when bad things happen typically. Okay, and we talked about B tags, which B tags are female only. So one of the things that gets a lot of people confused is when they're applying, they'll see combination license. Combination license, think of that as like the lowest tier. Um, that's what gets you in the game. That's like your kill tag, your hunt tag, or whatever. So combination license, you need that before anything else. Then if you draw your combination license, the next tier up is if you want to hunt a draw area, you have to apply for what's called a permit. And permits take bonus points. Now you can draw a permit with no points, but your odds are lower. That's where I was talking about the squared thing. So if you put in as a non-resident, you're going to select non-resident combination license, and then you're going to pick either deer combo. And I should talk about that for a second, because when I was first applying, I didn't understand why does it say deer combo? What's the combo? You're just getting one license for a deer. And the combination part, and this applies for non-residents too, is whenever you buy a combination license, you also get a fishing license and an upland bird license. So whenever you see combination, it's not a combination of deer, it's the deer plus the upland bird plus the fishing license. So as a non-resident, you have three options. You can get a deer combination, which is just a deer tag. You can get an elk combination, which is just the elk tag, or you can get a big game combo, which is deer and elk in the same season. So you would select one of those three. If you just want to hunt deer, you just pick deer, just elk, just the elk combo, or deer and elk, you'd pick big game combo. So you'd select those. And then if you want to hunt a specific area, specific hunting district, that's a draw, you would also apply for a deer or elk permit. So if you're in the application software, the online licensing system that's called, you would select non-resident combination license of whatever choice you want, and then you would select your permit. And you could, if you're doing deer and elk, you could select a permit area for each, or you don't have to select them if you just want to hunt general tags. But then you would select permit, and then it's going to give you the option to buy a bonus point. If it's your first time applying, it doesn't really matter. But if you plan on applying in the future, I would definitely opt every time to get a bonus point, because the more years you apply and the more bonus points you accumulate, the better chance you're going to have to draw one of those draw areas or permit areas. So I would recommend definitely buying those. And then one of the last things I wanted to talk about is Montana's got a really cool program with a lot of acreage enrolled called the block management program. And what block managements are it's privately owned land. So let's say Joe Smith, the rancher, owns 10,000 acres. He can enroll his land in the block management program, and then that opens it up during the hunting season for public access. A lot of states have programs like this. In Kansas, it's called walk-in hunter access, and North Dakota, I think it's called plots, public land open to sportsmen. Michigan's got it. I think it's called HAP there, Habitat Access Program or something. Anyways, there's a lot of states that have these programs. And in Montana, there's two main types of block managements. There's a type 1 and a type 2. And the type 1 block managements, typically all you have to do to access those is go to a sign-in box. There'll be a little card in there where you put your name, your address, your vehicle, your license plate, and then you sign it, you drop your card in, and then you're good to hunt for the day. And then there's another type called the type 2. And for those ones, you need to contact either the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks office or the landowner themselves, and they grant you permission. So you can't just go onto a type 2 until you have written permission. But those are cool. And the type 2s, I think a lot of times the landowner just wants to meet the person or they want to have FWP vet the person. And a lot of times, unlike a type 1 where it's usually uncapped, you can have unlimited numbers of hunters potentially on a type 1. Type 2, they're usually capped at a certain number of hunters. Sometimes they'll divide a large property up into zones. So you might be assigned to a certain zone of the property, which, I mean, that sounds kind of bad, but a lot of times the zone's still 2, 3, 4,000 acres. So they're huge parts. They just don't want everybody on the property bunched up into one area. And that's a resource that a lot of non-residents that are coming for the first time don't know about or don't understand. So let's see if I can pull that up real quick. And again, I'll put this in the link. So right now, there's the spring property map. So in the fall, by August 15th every year, Montana's by statute or law, they're required to publish the new block management apps. Every year, some places drop out, some private lands go away, and a lot of times new ones come in. So this map is updated every year. Onyx typically does a good job of updating this, but later in the year, there'll be an option on this site to order a paper copy of the block management guide. And I highly recommend that because some of the properties that are enrolled have special restrictions. Like you can't drive vehicles on certain roads. Some of them are restricted to archery only or archery and shotgun. Some don't allow hunting of certain type of species. And none of that stuff shows up on Onyx. It only shows up in the block management guide. And I've seen on numerous occasions non-residents who I think in general are good people trying to follow laws, breaking the laws because they don't have the block management guide and they're, for example, they're hunting with a rifle in an archery area only because they just looked on Onyx and knew it was a type 1 area. They could just sign the ticket, go on there, but they didn't have the block management guide. And Onyx doesn't tell you this, that it's an archery only area. So then they're on there illegally hunting with rifles on an archery area. So don't be that guy. If you're watching this or you're planning a hunt, come back here and you can either download the maps or you can request a paper copy. FWP will mail you one, maybe two for free. And then I just keep one in my vehicle all fall. That way, if there's a block management that I want to hunt, I look in the guide, make sure there's no special restrictions, or if there are, then I follow the laws for that one. And those are rules that are set up by the property owner. So if you don't follow those rules, then you risk that property owner getting mad and taking their property out of block management. Then there's less public land to hunt. So that is a bad thing. So get one of those guides, follow the rules, and that will make everyone have a better season. Let's see if we got any more questions here. No more questions currently. So got a few people watching. And that was most of what I wanted to go over. Let me guys know if you're watching any additional questions. or if you have any questions about Montana hunting in general. Go ahead. Hey, Steve, thanks for joining. You have a good night too. All right. Looks like that was all the questions. I will post this. And if you guys have any additional questions, leave a comment in the video and I will try to answer them the best that I can. Thanks, everybody that tuned in. We'll catch you next time.